Welcome, everybody, to this week's Beyond Geopolitics, where this has been a fun exercise, just having conversations with people who are generally renowned. I try to look for guests. Sometimes Marty Seif has been co-host at different times. The idea is for guests who are not trapped by the rules of the system that is designed to fail. And who better to talk to on that point than Anton Chaitkin, who many of you watching have already seen either give lectures, read his books, or seen previous interviews with me. Anton had recently called me up and had a proposition for a bit of an emergency broadcast in a sense, but a little bit more than that. It's going to be a little bit more of an exposition of the tragic, the as you called it, Anton. I said I think you wanted to theme today's conversation or today's presentation, treason in the Caribbean, America's longest running tragi-comedy. Because I mean, it's a good timing since we are in a position where it does seem certain narratives are being constructed right now to prepare our minds for this idea of a U.S. military intervention into Venezuela. Another one into obviously not in the Caribbean, but in Africa. You have in Nigeria similar types of narrative being put into motion. Whether or not they'll act on that or not, I think remains a big question mark. But it's certainly a danger, and there's 200 years or 130 years of precedent of the U.S. getting enmeshed into insane military engagements in countries they should have nothing to do with, especially in the Caribbean and Latin America more broadly. So, Anton, however you want to approach this, thank you so much for doing this. I'm all ears, and I'm waiting your instructions for the PowerPoint.
Good. Well, Matt, I wanted to talk about a tragic comedy, the threatened invasion or enforced overthrow of the government of Venezuela. Uh, and there's a history to this, which is known to those who are perpetrators now of evil and of fiascos. And one thing I think they really fear is the public seeing what they're doing as the grand fiascos, like a black comedy. You know, when you think about comedy, uh, can crime and evil be a comedy? Well, I think the closest thing in popular culture to this, not a tragedy is where somebody noble has a terrible flaw and falls, and you learn from that. This is quite different. Think of a gang led by a very self-absorbed leader and they rob a bank, a really rich bank. And the result of that is the explosion of the bank. And so they sit, or they're all dead, or maybe not there. Maybe they survive it, but the bank is there in ruins. So it's a fiasco. And this happens again and again. Imagine it would be tiresome, but it stretches out going back to the early days of the American Republic. So it's not tiresome to look back at these. I'm going to bring up five previous adventures in the Caribbean basin. That is the Gulf South of the United States, the Atlantic coast of Mexico, the Cuba, and a couple of other places perhaps, but the Caribbean in that name, and the northern coast of the Atlantic Ocean for South America. So in each case, we have adventures seeking uh, to conquer or otherwise use this area for evil purposes. And these are purposes opposed to the national interests of the United States in the extreme. That is, that the people here are involved uh, with attacks against these areas in direct opposition to the existence and welfare of the United States again and again. And they are involved with murder, assassination, with secret government as opposed to constitutional government. Always. That's a principle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's the principle of criminal activity as well. And again, it's focused on as a kind of a mythos for this area of the Caribbean basin. So let's start this history with Aaron Burr. Well, no, I'm sorry. I have to claim pull a little bit of rank. My book, Treason in America.
All right, so I'm taking that as the cue to start showing some of these slides. So you see a few
Yes,
images
that's
here,
right.
and
There
the
we
first
go.
one here is your impeccable book, Treason in America. I think you wrote or published in what, 1988 or something?
80. It was published. This full edition was published in 1985.
Hmm.
Treason in America, from Aaron Burr to Averell Harriman: A History of the Eastern Establishment at that time, and it's about the British and Anglo-American side versus the American nationalists and patriots going back to the American Revolution. Um, so it's about the traitors. So uh, I have some of these things that I'm going to discuss in this book, but this what I'm going to say today goes beyond that. So that's my credentials going back that far. I've written quite a bit since then. So go on to the next one, Aaron Burr.
I just think that this, by the way, is such an important document. It's such an important resource that I'm gonna just make it explicit here for those who are watching. A link to either purchase this, or I think there's actually a copy available online free. I don't know if they're okay with me sharing a free copy, or should people be directed towards the one that they have to purchase online?
Whichever. I mean, the online doesn't have some of the features of this,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to get this book. It's out of print, and
That's the problem. Yeah. So well, I'm gonna bring the one from archive.org available. So go to the description box, download the copy from archive.org, and then really, really cherish this because the work they did pulling together the mapping of the fifth columns inside of the heart of America from 1799 all the way up until the present is in, extremely important. So I just wanted to really just endorse that. And now I will
yeah.
let you proceed.
Okay, so the first adventure I'm going to get into here. This is Aaron Burr in later life. He's a little more handsome than that earlier. Uh, I portray him as a British agent. He's more than that, but he found himself in that position because he was not favorable to the American Revolution, really, in his philosophy, and he betrayed again and again. Uh, the first thing I'll mention is that he betrayed New York City. Uh, he was a politician going against the founding government of Washington and Hamilton. But in New York City, he set up what was supposed to be a water company to deliver water through pipes to New York City. And using a little seen clause, he made it into a bank, which
Mm,
became later Chase Manhattan Bank. And he used that bank in his day for secret political operations. Uh, and the city didn't get the water. Then he ran for vice president with Thomas Jefferson. When the ticket got elected, Burr betrayed Jefferson by acting covertly to get the Congress to make him president instead of Jefferson. Uh, then he,
Sorry, Anton, I know you have a flow to what you're trying to do, and
yeah,
I'm sorry if I'm going to be obstructive here, but what you just said is something I didn't know. I'm wondering if maybe you could take a moment to
no, I'm
elaborate a
not
little
going to go into
more.
that. People can
No?
check it out. Those
Okay.
things are very
All right.
widely known. If you
Okay.
can consult any history.
All right. I
If
will
I get to
withhold my.
something, trust me,
Okay.
these things are you can look it up anywhere.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. I'll withhold
uh,
my question mark on that point.
yeah.
Okay.
And then the next thing was that he ran for governor of New York and betrayed the country uh, by seeking an alliance with northern states to break up the United States and have the North secede. Uh, and his aristocratic lineage was featured by the Northerners who backed him for this role. Hamilton called him out, exposed his ambitions, and Burr got him in a duel and killed him. And then the next thing was that he betrayed, and Hamilton was a great leader still of the country at that time. So then the next thing was that his adventure in the South, going down to the Gulf of Mexico with the ambition, raised a private army with the ambition to break off a part of the United States, conquer Mexico, and set up an empire in the Caribbean basin. And for this, he was intercepted. And next slide, please. He was put on trial for treason. And this is a depiction of his trial. I don't know which lawyer is shown here. Burr is on the left, but his
Yeah, same here.
lawyer
Yeah.
was his most important lawyer in this trial was the American, the Southern oligarch named Edmund Randolph, a very crucial figure in the development of the Southern point of view against the United States, anti-national, pro-imperial. So he was acquitted of treason because they didn't have all the evidence. He fled from a further charge of murder stemming from the killing of Hamilton, went to England, consorted with the British War Cabinet and Jeremy Bentham, came back to the United States and planned the creation of the Democratic Party. Okay, next, the next slide, please. In imitation, in many ways, of the Burr story, this is James D. Bulloch, Bulloch, and he was most famous historically. Go to the next slide for this adventure, where he was the head of the Confederate Secret Service in England during the Civil War. You see the Alabama flag. This is the warship, the Confederate States ship Alabama, used as a pirate or raider ship against U.S. shipping during the Civil War. The Bulloch famously made the arrangements with England for England to build the warships for the Southern slave owners' rebellion against the United States. Go back to Bulloch because got to see his adventure. Now, he was in the U.S. Navy for about 15 years as a young man, and then he went over to an adventure called filibustering, which meant that people in the slave South from the higher families, the richer families, and people working with them, adventurers, uh, had private armies which went into Mexico and particularly into Cuba and into Nicaragua, all throughout the basin, the Gulf South of the U.S. as well, but Cuba, Mexico, Nicaragua, to spread slavery into these countries. These are called filibusters. It comes from a Dutch word for pirates.
Oh, that's a
Freebird.
very different meaning of word than I was associating with
Yeah, it's two
in our
different
modern
meanings.
lexicon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's this long speech in the Congress
Yeah.
has is some I don't know how it got, but it probably comes from the same word, but it means something entirely different. So
I guess yeah,
these
like
were
your hijack. I guess it comes from like idea of hijacking something or whatever. But is this like story of William Walker, like the
yes,
where he
William Walker
yeah
went into Mexico and to Nicaragua. He became dictator of Nicaragua, and I think he was then shot
yeah
in this adventure. Uh, but this was the attempt to create a Southern slave empire. Uh, it was secession of the Southern states, as well as creating this other empire in this Latin America that would basically crush the American Republic. That was the idea. They would be an empire alongside of their big brother, the British Empire, and working with them.
mm.
Um, and so he also sent $30,000 to Montreal, which was occupied by the British at the time, and that was to be used by the group, including John Wilkes Booth, that took this money and funds to go down and attack Abraham Lincoln. Booth killed Lincoln.
Mm.
Uh, um, so uh, let's go on to the next slide. So he's the head of
And
the
just to make that that's
Confederate.
a deal. That's a big deal. So it's specifically Bulloch who is directly tied to a wire transfer of $30,000 to banks in Canada that were directly tied or funded the
Yes,
operation to kill Lincoln.
I have that in the appendix to volume two of Who We Are,
That's a big
published
deal.
April 2025. If you go into the only published biography, a scholarly work, pretty well written about Bulloch, it goes through that whole adventure of the money for the uh, uh, attack on Lincoln, his transfer. I actually provide the documents, the pictures of the documents from Confederate records. But
Wow.
this book, I forget the name of it, but you can easily look up. It's the only published biography. It's well reviewed, uh, and so there's no refuting it. I want to. You could say that they were only planning to kidnap Lincoln. And that's what many historians say.
Mm.
And I can't say anything more than that. If you're kidnapping the president in wartime, which is what the plan was, and that's what happened, not they didn't. In other words, it was during wartime. You're going to have to kill. I mean, you're going to end up.
Yeah.
It's likely you're going to kill him. But anyway, leave all that aside. He sent that money to the murder crew, to the crew that did carry out the murder.
Mm.
So let's go on. Next slide. His nephew, his sisters, actually his half sisters, uh, son, Theodore Roosevelt,
Wow.
uh, as a young man, went to England from New York, where he's born, because Bulloch was in exile. He was not pardoned by the U.S. after the war, even though a lot of Southern leaders were. And he edited the papers of Bulloch, these documents and stuff, to try to make sure that Bulloch was not implicated in a way that would endanger him. Bulloch came secretly a couple of times to New York, even though he was not pardoned. But Teddy Roosevelt was revered him. And so here's a man who learned from Bulloch about strategy, naval strategy, writing, and so forth. So that was his great mentor and idol. So Teddy Roosevelt gained the presidency in the United States through the assassination of another president, William McKinley. And as I'm going to write extensively on in my next volume of Who We Are, he was one of the leaders of the enemy faction to McKinley. So he got to be president by the assassination of his opponent in American politics. As president, Teddy Roosevelt set up the secret services of the United States, not intelligence. I'm talking about secret services, that is, secret from the American people, not secret from the enemy, like you have a military guy that needs intelligence and sends an agent, and of course he has to keep secrets. But this is something different. He set up what was called military intelligence and what became known as the FBI. And the original use of these things was to intimidate and spy on Congress and to intimidate and spy on the American people insofar as they opposed what he and his friends were doing, particularly with respect to Latin America. Next slide. This is a Frederick Remington painting, the Western painter, of depicting Theodore Roosevelt before he was president, having recruited a group of college students and polo players, the more of the elite, people who wanted to have an adventure, charging up a hill in Puerto Rico, in Cuba rather. And this is part of a war which Theodore Roosevelt and his faction forced on the president, McKinley, before McKinley's assassination, which was the culmination of this evil action. So here, this is very famous for Teddy Roosevelt. You can see a movie called Arsenic and Old Lace. And in that movie, there's a fun depiction of somebody who is insane, who thinks he is Theodore Roosevelt, charging up the stairs, saying, "Charge!"
Yeah.
And so there's a comic aspect to this. And why do I say this was a fiasco? Like Burr's adventures, like the South, the lost cause. Well, didn't Teddy Roosevelt succeed in allying the United States to the British Empire and having the white people of the world, or the white English speakers of the world, rule the other races? Well, it can't work, can it? It is a fiasco, and he did this on the ruins of American influence in the world. I'm going to get back to that at the end of this. I'll show you what I mean by that. But certainly, the ruins included the millions dead in World War I, of which he was very, very much responsible. He and King Edward VII worked together when he became president. So the secret services, secret government, and hostility to the building up of civilization. These are destroyers of civilization. The Panama Canal that whose building he supervised was, he didn't think of it to begin with, but he saw it through, and it was used against the development of South America, not in cooperation with it. They were to be kept poor and weak. Next one.
Yep.
Allen Dulles. He and his brother John Foster Dulles were lawyers for an imperialist law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, which played a big role in ripping off Panama from Colombia back in the 19th century and into the period of Teddy Roosevelt. And they represented as lawyers the Anglo-American financial firms, banks on Wall Street, and people with connections to the British Crown. And he was the head of a faction in American intelligence that was the evil faction, not the patriot faction. These are the people going directly back into the Teddy Roosevelt uh, uh, anti-nationalist, anti-national, internationalist faction, uh, going back to these adventures. And of course, he is he and his brother were involved with Hitler. I have written a lot about that, helping to build up the Hitler machine. But for the Americas, they overthrew the government of Guatemala for the banana company. But let's go to the next slide. Here's where the invasion of Cuba by mercenaries, or not mercenaries, but some of them were, but these are people trying to anti-Castro Cubans. And this is a fiasco. These people were captured, they died. Some of them were brave. I don't know. It's irrelevant. It's a terrible fiasco, but it was used to try to trap the incoming president, John Kennedy, into giving up his resistance to the Anglo-American imperialists and to going back to American national interests. Kennedy struggled with this for for a large part of his presidency before he briefly was master of the situation. But again, Allen Dulles became the head of the CIA. This is not, you cannot understand this as American intelligence. These people are dedicated to international interests. And they wouldn't disagree with that. They would say that they represent American interests, but they put international interests, they would call it reality, not just the betrayal of our country. And then I believe that Allen Dulles, along with some people like Lyman Lemnitzer in the Pentagon, are the best candidates to be understood as having engineered the assassination of President Kennedy. These people are destroyers of civilization. They help to create the NATO secret gangs, Gladio and so forth, that were not for the building up of civilization in Western Europe. They were murder gangs. They operated in many places in the world for murder and for private interest. And the American interest was exemplified by Kennedy winning over the friendship and in many cases loyalty of other nations whom the communists were trying to influence, because we had influence which people like Allen Dulles destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Did they destroy it on purpose? I say yes. The history of this entire sweep of adventures, I believe, proves it. Not just these adventures, but others. They want to destroy American influence? Yes. Go ahead.
The true idea of influence, it comes with trust and goodwill, right? And if you look at what was Burr destroying by creating these different plots, was the goodwill that people like Benjamin Franklin and Hamilton had to try to help cultivate a world of cooperating republics in the years before that. In the world, all cultures were looking to America as a real beacon to throw off the shackles of empire and create something more human. And the same thing with Ulysses S. Grant, who also working internationally, and people had a lot of trust for the United States and what Lincoln had create
Yes,
had shaped.
but
Yeah,
Matt, you're not being serious. Can you call Grant a serious person? What did he know about warfare? What did he know about power? What did he know about using force and modern technology? How he's only the general that led us to victory in the Civil War. What would
yeah,
he know about these things? What would
yeah.
Lincoln know about these things? These
Mhm,
they're sissies, according to Teddy Roosevelt. Or they're
mhm,
so I'm I'm talking about power, real power in the world.
mhm,
These guys have the power to destroy. Our side has the power to build and win a solid majority for governance in our own country and friendship and loyalty that endures in other countries because they see our success, not fiascos.
mhm.
Let's
Yep.
go on to the next one.
Yes, sir. And just one thing, Cuba as well. That was from your writings in the Treason in America. It was Cuba that was supposed to be the center control mechanism of the Empire of the Golden Circle, right? The secret.
That's right. The Southern Slave Empire. This is
Yeah.
in that same. Allen Dulles is repeating the invasions of Cuba that took place in the 1850s. Bulloch was arrested in Havana. I neglected to
Wow,
mention
that's important.
by the Spanish in 1854.
Damn.
Just before that, the president of the United States, Zach Taylor, arrested Quitman, John Quitman, who sent invasions into Cuba and was trying to have the U.S. broken up at the same time. He was arrested,
Mm,
and Taylor threatened to hang all the traitors, like people like Bulloch, who were trying to break up the Union.
mhm.
And shortly after making that avowal that he would hang these traitors, the president mysteriously died. It's all in the treason book. Let's go
Yeah.
on to the next. All right, so this is Oliver North, a Marine colonel, but here he is depicted with his uniform on, but he is a secret operative of the Reagan Bush government. The Vice President George H.W. Bush was arguably in charge of almost all of the secret activities that North and these other guys were doing, but there were many other people involved. And so what he's remembered for in one uh, the major thing I would say is what was called the Iran-Contra affair, where uh, North and others, people in the CIA, people in other agencies and conduits, uh, private and public and foreign, uh, gave arms to the Iran Revolutionary Islamic regime and got money in exchange for arming that government. They got money from them, and that was against an embargo on Iran, against U.S. law at the time. So it was illegal. So it was covert, and they used the money they got. And this is all that came out at the time. They used the money to pay for uh, supposed rebels in Central America fighting against the Sandinista regime. I guess that's Nicaragua, uh, which they called communist. North and his friends said they were fighting communism. So we're gonna and it was the Congress and they had passed a law saying that we're not funding this group of people who are not going to succeed. They're doing things which are going to end up as a disaster. So we're not funding them. So they got around this by arming the Islamic regime of Iran and using the money to break the law to fund they called them the Contras, to go against Contra, the Sandinistas who were the government of Nicaragua. Next slide. This turned into a terrible fiasco. This guy, Eugene Hassenfuss, was captured by the Nicaraguan leftist government October 5th, 1986. Here he's being led away, and he blurted out everything. He's told about what was going on. And so this became a huge scandal in Congress. A man named Elliott Abrams, who was one of the architects of this policy, one of the working with Oliver North, was convicted in this scandal a little bit later on, was convicted of lying to Congress and trying to cover up all the things that Hassenfuss and others exposed. He was pardoned. Abrams was pardoned by President Bush. Let's go on now. Oh, go back. That's Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Go to President Trump. There he is. Okay, now those two men, Trump, the president, and Marco Rubio, are now promoting the threat with U.S. military force to invade or otherwise use force to bring down, or use the threat of force and use covert CIA activities, which the president has authorized, to bring down the government of Venezuela. It's another in the sequence of, it seems like an endless sequence of fiasco adventures in the Caribbean basin. So one has to ask the question, who is doing this? Who is actually promoting this? Where did they get the idea for this? I mean, Rubio is a Florida politician. He has the anti-Castro electorate there. That's used to explain some of these things. That's ridiculous. The policy is so obviously something that is going to be a fiasco and is going to go against American interests. Now, I want to bring up now, I don't have a picture, but you can visualize this, you can look it up. Yesterday, November 20th, 2025, the Council on Foreign Relations magazine called Foreign Affairs had an article by Elliott Abrams, the guy that was convicted of lying to Congress and covering up this Iran-Contra affair. And the headline on this article was, hold on, how to topple Maduro. That's the president of Nicaragua, and why regime change is the only way forward. He's arguing that Trump must use military force. Now, in this article,
so people can actually see it. Go to Foreign Affairs.
Go ahead. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, and there's actually the article right here, November 20th, how to topple Maduro and why regime change is the only
Elliott Abrams. Okay. Yeah. Now, in this article, if you space down a little bit, you would see a phrase, and I'm going to read this to you. It's Venezuela. You don't need to show this. I'm just going to read it. You got to trust me. This is in here. Yeah. Venezuela is a far better candidate for regime change and a return to democracy than were the countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. Now, he's saying that, though is telling you that those were fiascos, right? When we did those invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. But it was Elliott Abrams himself who led the charge into invading those countries. In 1998, he and his friends in the Project for a New American, what is it called? New American Century. Project for the New American, sent a letter to President Clinton calling for an invasion of Iraq in order to stop Saddam Hussein from having weapons of mass destruction. So these people are professional bunglers. The bank that they want to rob will be blown up for sure. He says in the article yesterday that Trump, when he uses military force, what will happen is there's going to be a succession of good events in Venezuela that will cause satisfaction to the people of Venezuela and to the United States. This is so obviously false from everything we know about this gang that's been operating in the last several decades, as well as these earlier guys. Fiasco after fiasco, creating terrorism, creating tragedy, but definitely having the bank robbers themselves fall on their faces amid the ruins of what they tried to do. One fiasco after another. Now, let me conclude this with a reminder of something beautiful. There is in Venezuela a hydroelectric dam, one of the greatest hydroelectric projects in the world. It's called the Gura Dam, Gura, or the Simon Bolivar Dam. And it was built by the government of Venezuela with the assistance, engineering and design assistance and component assistance of the United States of America, our government and private companies, wonderful companies like Harza, Harza Engineering, and Kaiser, the Kaiser Engineering, the people that built the steel mill and the aluminum installations and built dams here in our country. They did things all over the world. The same people built stuff in other countries in the Kennedy era and in the Eisenhower era. Kennedy was really the one pushing this strongly in the Alliance for Progress, which is all blown away by the murderers, Allan, Dulles, etc. Does Donald Trump really want to blow up this American memory? Wouldn't he rather restore the United States influence? Isn't that real influence? Right now, China and Russia are building infrastructure in Venezuela and other South American countries for transportation and energy infrastructure. They're building up civilization in that way. Why isn't the United States doing that? Why shouldn't we play that role? Don't we believe in civilization? I think that if we have any existence or identity, we're going to do that again. But it means that people have to learn to laugh at this group of bank robbers who are going to blow up the bank and fall on their faces and bring civilization down. I guess you could say that the Dr. Strangelove with Peter Sellers about the end of the world as a fiasco, that's black comedy in the extreme. Mm-hmm. I suppose that's one possible outcome, but definitely a fiasco, definitely something which people with some courage will laugh at. You got to laugh at these people. They're so bad. They're so foolish. They're going to fail. If they go ahead blowing up the bank, they would say just before the ruins of the bank come down, they would say, well, look, I just had a success. Look at the explosion. Oh, wait a minute. The bank's on the ground. Holy cow. That's how bad this is.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate Cervantes and his insight into the insanity of the chivalric knighthood,
Yes.
ideology,
Yeah,
going off to chase monsters to give a sense of meaning.
I
And a lot of these
know.
crusader types like Rubio, and they're all really Don Quixotes in so many ways. Just really try, or Teddy Roosevelt, he loved these Knights of the Round Table stories. He was totally brainwashed by this way of thinking, and
Yeah,
loved the idea of becoming a real manly man by going off and being
that's
tough
right.
guy, super
Yeah,
infant and
it's
so
macho.
destructive themselves at the end of the day. Like you said,
It's
it is.
macho, but so in that point of view, an engineer, who builds something is not a macho, is not manly, whereas somebody who blows it up is manly. Build a bridge, you're a sissy. You're sitting, you're using your mind, you're using tools like a pencil, you're studying things. But a man of action who blows it up, he's a real man, right? In their view. I don't think
Yeah,
so. Anyway,
yeah.
I gotta go. We gotta terminate this, but let's terminate this enterprise with prejudice.
Amen. Thank you, Anton Chaitkin. Thank you, everybody, for watching this special episode of Beyond Geopolitics, and we'll catch you again next time. Take care. Bye bye.